You're listening to The Coaching Divas, a podcast for everyone navigating the twists and turns of corporate life.
Follow along as we chat through common workplace situations and extend the coach approach to help you handle them with ease.
We offer a cross-sectional view that spans generations, positions, workplaces, and lifestyles.
We're your hosts,
Claudia Jones,
Daniela Velkovic,
and Misha Jethba, and we are
The Coaching Divas.
Welcome back to The Coaching Divas, where we explore the evolving world of work and the human experiences that shape it. Women make up nearly half of the global workforce, yet conversations about women's health, menstruation, fertility, postpartum recovery, menopause are still often avoided in the workplace. This silence has real consequences. Missed accommodations, misunderstood challenges, and talented women held back or pushed out. Today, we're breaking that silence with our guest, Laure Goubau. Laure is a certified executive coach and former professional development leader at McKinsey & Company, where she co-led the firm's Canadian Women's Network and mental health initiatives. With extensive experience supporting professionals through career challenges and advancing equity, diversity, and inclusion strategies, Laure brings valuable insight into how organizations can better support women at every stage of their careers. Together, we'll explore the intersection of women's health and work, the barriers that persist, and the steps leaders and companies can take to create inclusive, supportive workplaces where everyone can thrive. Let's get into it.
Welcome, Laure. Welcome to the Coaching Divas podcast. We're so happy to have you here. For our listeners out there, Laure came to us through the executive coaching program that we all took together at Royal Roads University. So happy to have her back here and to reconnect with old members of our cohort. So welcome. I know when we did our coaching program, we certainly focused on what areas of expertise we want to work in, how we want to present ourselves. So that intersection between women's health and the workplace. Laure, how did you come about that niche that you're specializing in?
Hi, Claudia. Hi, Daniela. Hi, Misha. It's great to be here, and thank you so much for having me. So that pull that I had to focus on women's health and leadership development and that intersection, as well with career progression, it came approximately a year after I had left my corporate job. And I had already started working as a solo entrepreneur, doing coaching really with a broad range of folks, with emerging leaders, with experienced leaders, men and women. But as I was reflecting on my entire career and all of the challenges that I had faced, couple that with me getting more and more interested in the women's health gap and discovering the femtech space in Canada, I realized that there was a need that wasn't being filled, which is coaching in that intersection of leadership development and women's health.
Was there any specific situation that you came across or that you experienced yourself that kind of helped you realize that this was a gap within the workplace and health?
Well, yes. I think
if you're open to sharing.
No, of course. I'm totally open to sharing. When I was reflecting on my own career trajectory, what I realized is that it was peppered with women's health challenges. So I started as a litigation lawyer in a major Canadian law firm. And after my third year in that context, I burnt out and I had to take 3 months off to recover from that first challenge. It was a blessing in a sense because it allowed me to do a career pivot. But at the same time, I did leave the practice of law. So this was the first moment as I was reflecting on that. I was like, blessing, but interesting because I was a pretty good lawyer and I could have continued on that path in which I had invested a lot of time going to law school, had already worked 3 years, etc. And so that was the first moment of reflection. Then a few years later, I had my daughter. And so again, this is another big shift or a big moment in a career trajectory. Going away for a year, coming back, and all of the effects of motherhood, the impacts of maternal health on that can impact how you're showing up at work. So that was another one. And then fast forward about 9 months later, after coming back to work after maternity leave, I was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer. And so at that point, I was 34 years old, 33, but I lived the entire 34th year of my life going through all the treatments to overcome this cancer. So that included IVF, that included chemotherapy, surgery, radiation, and then a hormone therapy that made it so that in my mid-30s, I was now going through all the symptoms of perimenopause. So hot flashes, brain fog, mood, all the things. And then in that context, going back to work. So again, another moment of reflection where I thought, wow, like this is quite significant, right? Like this intersection of women's health and my career. So I went back, fast forward a few years, COVID hits, and in this talent role that I had, there was a lot of readjustments that needed to be made in how we were managing our workforce and supporting our colleagues. And, the classic pivot. And so and with a kid, a young child at home, and in that context, I also burnt out. And so I had to take another month off because of that. And so you put all these things together, and I was like, wait a minute, like, there's some significant challenges there. And some of which I kept on going, and others I kept on going so much so that I even, I left this law firm job and went to McKinsey, and I was like, bring it on. Like I'm more challenges. Like I'm ambitious and I have like goals, etc. I even did like my coaching training with the U3. But yeah, it's putting all those pieces together that it's a big realization for me that there is an intersection between what we go through as women and the health challenges that we have and how it can affect our career progression.
Well,
that was a very long answer. I'm sorry.
No, it's lovely.
It's perfect.
Because it resonates with me immensely. I mean, you've put words together for a lot of what I'll say my journey has been from a career perspective. Some slightly different traumas, but it really elevates the idea that at least you had the awareness to say, I'm burnt out. And what I'm realizing as I'm hearing your story is that, as a female, I'm conditioned differently. I've been conditioned to, I will tolerate, it is strength to push through this. But I think one of the things that really struck me was this idea that we overlook women's health. And that all of these experiences, I mean, I had a fertility journey that didn't work out. And, people were telling me, go talk to a therapist. And that wasn't what I needed at the time. And that's where I actually pursued coaching and worked with a coach at the time. Because for me, I didn't need to know how to process where I'm at and my information and the grieving process and all of what therapy would focus on. I needed to figure out, how do I move forward? What does the next steps look like? So as you explore this, how do you share this? I mean, obviously you have to go to corporate organizations and share that this is important. How do you share that story and get, the people that need to make the decision to pay the dollars to jump on board and take this seriously? What do you find is important to share and acknowledge, I guess, in those opportunities?
Well, I'm going to circle back on what you said first, Daniela, though, because I think what you raised is super important. It's the fact that we come to realize the impact of our health on our journeys. And then it's like, okay, how do I get some help? And you and I think we have a bit of, and I think, Misha and Claudia as well. We love coaching. We see the value in coaching. And it is one of many levers that we can pull to advance, right? And to navigate these challenges that we might encounter. But it is not something that a lot of people are that aware of. And so again, what you just said makes me think of a conversation that I had with another woman who was telling me that she had suffered a miscarriage. And she was advised to, again, go see a therapist. And so she did. And then she realized it's not for me because, again, similar to what you said, I don't need therapy right now. I need someone to help me figure out what this all means for my career, because I'm asking myself some serious questions about my ambition. Am I working too hard? Did I cause this? How do I continue with this objective of building a family? And what I want to accomplish at work, right? Partnership is on the horizon for me, et cetera, et cetera. So I think you're highlighting again, like this need that we have, but that is not fully being addressed. And so this is really like one of the core reasons why my company, GloriaCoach.com, why we exist, because there is a need to support women at that intersection. Now, how to have this conversation with organizations? This is tough because at this juncture, some organizations see the value in coaching, others do not yet, right? And so there is a bit of a conversation that needs to happen there. We are hearing more and more conversations about women's health and needing to address specifically women's needs, but we're still at the beginning of the conversation.
Yeah.
So part of the work that I do is right now, there's a lot of education that is still happening. So really understanding first and foremost, what's the business case for having women in leadership and more innovation, more inclusive, more productivity, all the great data that we have there that will show a correlation with having women at the top and in leadership roles. But we're far from where we should be, right? That we continue without any intervention at this rate. It'll take 50 years before we reach gender parity. But then it's helping our organizations understand that, yes, there's a lot of things that are getting in the way, that are structural, that are, lack of sponsorship, all sorts of reasons that we don't need to dive into right now. But then there's this other factor where I come in and I say, well, there's also supporting women through health. There's a lot of data out there, right? Like if you look at an IVF journey, the median time for an IVF journey is 125 hours. Painful periods, this can amount to 9 days of lost productivity per year per woman in North America. 1 in 10, the Canadian Menopause Foundation will tell you that 1 in 10 women will leave their careers because of symptoms of perimenopause. So this amounts to huge costs and loss of talent and hidden losses in productivity for organizations. And so if we want to continue to push for gender parity and see the value of having women in leadership roles, which I think we all agree with, then we need to start paying attention to this.
And what you've also highlighted, we also need to talk about it because we don't talk about it. It's almost like I grew up in the generation you didn't tell people that you had cramps.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I can't sit comfortably in this meeting right now because I'm experiencing I'll go graphic, a really bad cramp. I can't get on that call, right? And so that, you may not choose to use those words, but, it's still, as a use case, it's one of those things where how do we get more comfortable as females to even share, hey, I'm going to have to take X time off because in these mornings I have a cycle of infertility. And having that conversation with our managers to actually have them have empathy for us in what we're going through and create that support that we need in the workplace. And I don't know how far we've moved that dial either.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think, again, here, there's a lot that we're just at the beginning of this quote unquote level of comfort that we might be seeking. And I don't even know if we'll get there in our generation. But ultimately, I think it's not just being able to have a conversation with your manager. I think there's a lot of things that need to happen, which includes filling the women's health gap. Because right now, like if you're having painful periods, it just highlights that there's no solution, right? You do not have a medical solution to help you with this, right? And so, for example, might not even know this, but you might have, I'm not saying you, but in general, right? You're just told to bear through it, but you might have endometriosis and it'll take you 8 years to get a formal diagnosis. And so we just end up suffering through it and finding ways to patch and just, navigate this intersection of health and work. But it's not just having a conversation with your manager, but it is also investing in women's health with more data, more research, more solutions so that what you just described, Daniela, actually is no more.
Yeah, yeah. I guess the other question I'd have is when you think about all the partners when it comes to women's health in the workplace, I mean, if we put it in the most basic terms, someone may say, we'll call the help wellness line. We have an employee help wellness line, and it's almost like a diminishing of what you really need. So do you see a need to have this conversation with insurance companies and all of the other parties that are part of that value chain for women's health? And I'm going off on a tangent, but I thought I'd raise it because it bothers me a lot. Like there's a lot of these topics I've kept quiet for a long, long time. Anyway.
And there's a lot of insurance companies that are starting to pay attention to all of this, and there's a lot of great stuff that's happening. So we have a lot more opportunities now to get support specifically for women's health challenges, for example, perimenopause or aging well. There's some great companies out there, and I don't think, I have some that I think about and that I talk about with my coaching clients so that they find solutions that might make sense for them. But I think there's already a lot of great stuff that's happening, right? Like right now, there's support out there so that you feel better, right? Your employee assistance program can be very robust. You can get support for mental health. You can get support. You can get, nutrition coaching. There's so much out there, which is amazing, which is really, really amazing. And at the same time, when you look at your leadership development for women, you also get a lot of really great stuff out there. There are coaching services that are being offered to a lot of managers and directors and whoever wants coaching in an organization. There's, programs. You could do 3 days at Harvard Business School, right? Like there's so many things that are being offered right now, which is amazing. But what you were talking about earlier, Daniela, and what I was describing as well is really putting the two together. Because it doesn't make sense. You can take care of your health on the left-hand side and you can do all this leadership development stuff on the right-hand side. But who is bridging the gap so that whatever you're doing on both sides is coherent and makes sense for you and makes sense for how you're physically doing so that you can actually push for, I'm told this is part of me, of my ambition. I want to become a better communicator. I want to become a better strategic thinker. I want to so that I access this next level of promotion. But I need to factor in how I'm physically doing so that I can actually get the most out of this leadership development thing that I'm working on. So this is where our coaching comes in. It's really at that intersection. See it as a Venn diagram, and we're right in the middle.
Because the one thing I would add to that, Laure, is, and I think you and I have spoken about this before, is that when I was going through perimenopause, I did not know how to recognize the symptoms, because it's not as though it hits you like one day you're fine, the next day you're perimenopausal. It doesn't happen. It's very gradual. And so I think maybe a way for help women recognize when they're starting to go through these stages and say, you know what, this doesn't feel right. And I think as we've spoken in the past, I really felt very alone. I didn't know who to reach out to. I didn't know I could talk to other women about this. Mind you, my department was mostly men, so it's kind of challenging there. I can talk to them about it. But, but there were other women in my company I could certainly talk to. And I just didn't know how to ask those questions, how to reach out, how to say, are you going through this too? Like, is this normal? Because, like I said, it's so gradual. And all of a sudden one day, like, especially for me, I became very short-tempered. I had no patience for anybody. If you didn't agree with me, you heard from me very robustly on my opinion about that. And I didn't realize that those are some of these symptoms of being perimenopausal, that you have this impatience, you have your short-tempered, you have brain fog, of course, everyone knows about the sweats and all that stuff, and those were starting to come. But those other symptoms, I really was not aware, and truly how it impacted me at work. And, thinking back on it now, it's probably why I left my last job. I thought the whole place was a disaster. And I think I was a disaster, but I didn't recognize it at the time.
It's a massive transition, and it is just so covered with taboo and shame and fear of being discovered as weak. This is unfortunate, but I think we still make this association like, oh, like you're flourishing, you're in your reproductive years. Oh, but wait, you're going to have a baby, therefore that will lower your productivity and your ambition and your career trajectory. Oh, and then like, okay, you're settling back in, great. You've got a lot of energy and your career is progressing. Oh, but no, perimenopause is now hitting you. So, and you're getting older. So your ovarian production is lowering. You must be less productive. So it's like you just can't. It's really, really.
You can't
We have
win.
you can't win. We have these associations about women and our health and what happens in our hormone and our health journey that make it extremely, extremely challenging, which are, covered in shame and in secret because we cannot let anyone know that this is happening. We were always told to suppress. I mean, I grew up in this type of environment where it's just like, suck it up, buttercup. Like,
Same.
I'm regularly catching myself, right? I was just texting a friend the other day. She was like, how's it going? When are we hanging out? And I just had to tell her, no, I'm not doing so well. She's like, what's going on? Oh, it's just PMS and a cold. It's just that. And so we do that with everything. It's just that, but it can be significant. And the same thing, like I had a 10-year-old daughter and she's telling me that her arm is hurting. Like she fell when she was skiing last winter. She's telling me her arm is hurting. And I'm like, come on, like, can't be that bad. And next thing you know, she has a fracture. Like we went to the doctor and we did all the things and she had a fractured arm. And again, like I'm perpetuating, and we probably all do it. We perpetuate this model that it's like, no, like your pain is not real. Your suffering is not real. Ultimately, what's going on in your body, it's just woo, you're making it up. But no, it's real. We go through a lot.
Yeah. Misha, you've been very, very quiet. I'm afraid we're scaring you to death. That's what's coming ahead for you.
No, I'm definitely not afraid, but it does resonate. And I think, I'm quiet because I'm taking it all in. But also, I think about, Daniela, you shared that we're conditioned to, and Laura, I think you just spoke to this as well. We're conditioned to suppress, come out strong. I think that also comes in with, some of the things that you're taught around the glass ceiling and things like that. So it's like, okay, anything that's going to be perceived as putting me at a disadvantage in my career, I'm going to not say a word about it so that I can be seen as on par, equal, just as capable as a man, because I don't want anything used against me or made to make me look weak.
Exactly.
And the struggle with that is, I'll admit this, I've had a sprained thumb for 3 weeks now, and I have not gone to see a doctor because I'm convinced it'll fix itself.
Yeah.
But like that's the most simplest of examples. And I mean, I've had kidney stones and been passing a kidney stone and just said, hey, I just need to cancel my morning meetings and then I'll see you guys in the afternoon. And it gets to the point where I think women are more susceptible of putting their health second to their career. And given that happens so often, where my brain has been circling in this whole conversation is, how do we get women to speak up?
You have to create a space that is safe to speak up. Right now, again, because of all the taboos that are associated around this topic of women's health, even among women, I think it creates a lot of barriers, right, to having these conversations. And I think you're right, like, to Claudia's point earlier, finding spaces where you can talk about what it is that's going on with you and how it is impacting you at work, and feeling that and knowing that there's no repercussion, right? Like there's not going to be a negative impact on that health challenge that you're going through. There's not going to be an impact in your career progression. I think is fundamental. And again, like I think people are full of great intentions, and I think we are starting to see change. I mean, I have women who are sending me private messages and on my LinkedIn telling me, I'm glad that you're talking about all of what you're talking about right now. And it gave me the courage to talk with my employer about a miscarriage. So this is another miscarriage story. Yes. And by the way, like 1 out of 5 pregnancies will end up in miscarriage, unfortunately. And so I had someone who wrote to me about this and telling me, like, I had a conversation with my employer about what had happened to me. And it was met with grace and care and support. So having that conversation, I think, is like an incredible first step. And then two, how it is met, I think we're starting to see the change, but we are so far from where I think we should be. Because again, these associations that we were just talking about, like you cannot look weak, you cannot look like it's impacting your career progression, or, you'll be passed on for an opportunity because someone else is doing it better or is not going through what you're going through, which is a shame.
Yeah. It's pretty important, right?
Yeah. Yeah. There needs to be a little bit more awareness, I think, about the women's health gap. Right now, women are being misdiagnosed. They have worse outcomes than men for the same conditions. Treatment is not adequate for women. Ultimately, all of this goes back to the fact that women's bodies have not been studied. Women's bodies have always been deemed too complicated because of our hormonal journey. And I think it's between 6 and 7% right now of Canada's federal government spending is specific to women only when it comes to research. At this point, also, it is not mandatory in clinical studies and research to include women. It's highly recommended, but it's not mandatory. So for the longest time, and still now, we are considered small men. And this is basically one of the core reasons why when you have painful periods, no true solution for you right now. And this is just one example. There are multiple situations out there that are not where we are not getting the treatment that we should be receiving because of the women's health gap. But we don't have to wallow in the gap. This is also super important, right? It's I think like there's so many things that we can do that goes towards raising awareness, having conversations about this, talking about this with our children, all the generations, right? Daniela, going to your point, and making sure that our employers are aware of this as well. And there are so many opportunities to get involved through hospital research centers, to universities, to invest in femtech. There's so many things we can do. And then one of the things that I think is fundamental here as well is, you can invest in yourself. Like, be aware of what's going on in your body. Start paying attention to your symptoms, for example. Like Claudia, you were saying like, oh, like this is gradually, my perimenopause is gradually creeping up on me. I'm like, oh, okay, interesting. Well, we can all start paying attention to our health. Again, moving away from suppress. It's not my problem. I don't want it to happen. I don't care about this thumb of mine. It'll fix itself. But it's like, start tracking and caring about it and finding solutions. And there are solutions out there. It's just that it's right now it's true, but it seems like a big black hole. But one, find the solutions that make sense for you. This is some of the things that we talk about in our coaching without telling people what to do, but being like, have you thought about this? Or is this an impression? Is this fact? Can you start paying attention to this? And then offering ideas, or in French, we say des pistes de solution. And then also do the coaching, do the executive coaching that helps you navigate whatever is going on in your body and your ambition and what it is that you're trying to do. So again, we do not have to sit in this women's health gap and feel sorry for ourselves. There are a lot of things that we can do so that we start to see change directly for ourselves, but then also in a broader sense for our families, for our daughters, for our mothers, for our colleagues at work, right? For our communities.
Yeah.
The ripple effects are huge.
I love the ownership that you're sharing and the idea that we can, as women, be our own advocates as well. For our leaders that are listening to these podcasts, what role can leaders play in normalizing these conversations?
I think first and foremost is educate yourself, because understanding the women's health gap, or just knowing that it is a thing, start there. Because a lot of people do not have this awareness. So educate yourself and then understand a little bit more what it is that women go through. Female cancers, a lot of the things that we talked about, perimenopause, periods. Yeah, so educate yourself and then also know what is available within your organization. you probably have really great programs out there. So are you aware of them? Can you, if you're a manager, can you offer to direct someone towards the resources that are available already? I would say create a space, which is super tough, right? Because you might carry it might be a little bit embarrassing for yourself if you're a manager, if you're a male manager. But how is it that you can understand a little bit more and create an empathetic space so that it's perhaps a little bit less uncomfortable for everyone to redirect someone with the right resources? And also have courage, develop the courage to say like, oh, these comments that we're making were about women and their career progression that are rife with ageism, or, some of the things that we said earlier. How can we address this? And how can we be zero tolerant about this, right? Because it's unacceptable behavior. So there's a lot of things that we can do. But I think first and foremost, it starts with education.
Yeah, because I know myself growing up, especially in my first, again, working for 30 years, I was in my 20s, back in the mid 80s, working away. And some of the derogatory comments that was come, especially out of men, when women weren't performing. I mean, it was just like, wow, like, really? You're saying that to me? You have no idea what I'm going through. And so, I mean, over the years, mind you, I've taken on more and more leadership positions, so I don't think anybody would ever say that to me now. But I don't know if these comments are being made anymore. And I certainly hope that they're not, because it's not fair. We can't help it, right? It's just part of being a woman.
No, exactly. But I think like no one is overtly sexist right now, right? No one is overtly misogynistic. It's more what is happening behind the scenes, and it's more related to structural issues and a lot of blind spots. Because like I mentioned, like we'll talk to women about lean in more, get over your imposter syndrome. We'll get you a sponsor. Like these are all important and great things, and they help women progress. And it'll help against this proverbial broken rung. It'll help against, breaking the glass ceiling, like all the things. But like I mentioned, there's this other aspect that we don't think about, which is women's health. And it is something that we should pay attention to. Like right now, like the way that I've been looking at this, there's about 2 million Canadian women right now in managerial roles. And based on the hypotheses, like very conservative hypotheses that I use, there's an estimated financial annual loss related to women's health that is about $8 billion. The Canadian Perimenopause Foundation also has data around this, right? So the hypotheses that I look at is basically on average, right? 10% of women under the age of 40, only 10%. I'm being very conservative. Only 10% of women under the age of 40 will experience a women's health challenge every year. Only 10%. And then maybe we'll say, oh, okay, under the age of 10 days of productivity lost a year due to women's health. 25% over the age of 40 will experience a women's health challenge. Again, I'm being very conservative. So like if you put all these hypotheses together, and then you look at the salary of you make averages around the salary of these women, and then you look at the population that's being affected. Well, here we go. Like it amounts to a lot of losses. And so why wouldn't we start paying attention to this? Like it's important for our businesses, but it's important for our economy. So this is, again, just the push for women's health. Like we need to pay attention to this. We need to start filling the gap.
Yeah. I always reflect on the friends that chose to take maternity leave and then go back to the workplace 2 or 3 years after mat leave. So they left their job because they wanted to take care of their kids. And the level of loss they get in career progression because they did take that career leave always makes me sad, because they have so much to offer, but just by taking that time off, because they needed it, the family needed it, it puts them in a disadvantage. And then I also think about the friends who decided to cut their mat leave short, because if they weren't in that place, they were not going to get that promotion that their male counterparts had access to. So instead of doing the 12 months, they should cut it down to 7, because if I'm longer than that out of the office, I'm going to get overlooked. And so this really highlights for me that, why is there a pay gap? Yeah, it's going to, just by the fact that we have to make these choices, also creates that limiting ability to compete. And I don't like to say it that way, but that's been the experience I've seen over the past 20 years with some of the folks that I have within my own circle. So I guess the question I'd like to ask is, how can managers be trained, A, to respond with empathy and without bias when these health issues arise? And then how can they also remember not to forget the folks that are going through those health issues?
Well, it's one of the trainings that we offer.
So we got to be trained on it. I love that. I love that. Tell us more.
So what we do is we offer a lot of data just to raise awareness. And we go about it also with a lot of storytelling and heart. Basically, the trainings that we do, we ask managers to think about women in their personal circles and consider perhaps a story where someone went through a certain health event. And then we extrapolate and we ask them to think about that at work and some of the conversations that haven't happened. And then we share scenarios that are based on true stories, by the way, and we get folks to problem solve, like what's an approach that you can take in these circumstances. So like, I don't know, a fictional character, Gisela, is late for a meeting. What are the assumptions? And I'm going very fast here. What are the assumptions that you're making about Gisela, who's aged 35 and is a super high performer, completely out of the ordinary? She's late for a meeting. She's so late that she's even asking Bobby to take over her part of the presentation. What are the assumptions that we can have about Gisela? Oh, there's something happening, or there's this, there's that. Or someone might even say she's unprepared. And then it's like, oh, wait a minute, behind the scenes, what happened to Gisela? Well, she fainted. She fainted and she was really embarrassed and she didn't want to tell anyone because of an underlying condition that is da-da-dee-da-da-dee-da-da-da. So it's just like raising awareness around all of these, what can be happening at home that we absolutely are not being cognizant of. And so just catching ourselves. So it's a little bit like trainings on unconscious bias, right? And so we have these mental patterns in our brain. We all have them. We have a brain, we have bias. And so how can we undo those a little bit through education and slowing down our thought process? And then how do we create a space where we can have conversation? So how do we have an empathetic approach versus one that is a little bright with bias and judgment? So that's a little bit of what we do.
That's awesome. That's exciting, actually. I think it's a value proposition that, I've always struggled with how little I knew about fertility and how little we have those conversations. And you're right, Claudia. Back in the old days, and it wasn't that long ago, 10 years, maybe 15 max, which to me is a whole other generation. It was almost mocked when you were dealing with, issues during your menstrual cycle, or you can't walk as fast as everybody else because the pain from the cramps is causing you to stumble, or you have to pop into the drugstore to get a medication that may or may not work as you're getting ready for that big presentation. Those are all coping mechanisms, right? Having those conversations and actually making it okay to say, hey, I am not doing well this afternoon. I need support for this and this and this. I think takes courage and confidence for sure.
But to your point, Daniela, I think we need to remember that asking for help is not us asking for our organizations to lower the bar, right? The idea behind all of this is actually, I'm doing all the things already. And I'm a valued performer. I'm an important part of this organization. Help me do even better, right? So I think it's important to make that reminder we're not lowering the bar in any way, shape, or form. And then to your other point about having more conversations, there's a lot of things that can happen already in organizations that are very low cost. Like having a panel around my fertility journey, or, my creating a family journey, whatever it is, right? Or my mental health journey, which can be very different between men and women. And so it's creating, having a panel over lunch so that people just start sharing and everyone in the organization starts feeling less alone. That can happen at very low cost. It doesn't have to be super complicated to start educating and start getting the conversations going. There's someone who I heard say this once in the Women's Health Conference that was held last year in Toronto, last fall. And this person said, the conversation that we're having right now about women's health at work is a little bit like the conversation that we had about mental health at work. 10 years ago. So we're just starting to have this conversation. And again, there are many ways to go about it, and they don't have to be huge. They don't have to be massive. They don't have to be costly, but we need to start having them.
I agree. Great conversation, Laure. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. One thing we like to do at the end of our podcast is just do a quick little round table as to some of our learnings and takeaways from this podcast. I'm going to ask you to go last since you're our guest speaker. What message do you want to leave us with? But I don't know if Danielle or Misha wants to just pipe in as to what learnings they have. And Misha is so quiet today.
So I'll go first. It's interesting. I feel today felt different for me from the perspective of I felt like one of our listeners more than I did a contributor, which is maybe why I'm so quiet today, because I am the youngest out of us. So I'm somewhere in the middle of my career, and things like family planning are definitely on my mind. And then stigmas around that as well of like, okay, what's going to happen to my career when that happens? So to me, my takeaways today are, 1, go get my thumb checked. 2, but okay, jokes aside, I think a big part for me is leaning in more to listen to myself, listen to my body, and really find the courage and confidence to speak up and find the right channels to get the support. I think that's one big takeaway. But some of the things you just finished saying, Laure, really hit home, which is, let's remember that I'm not asking for, if I do speak up, I'm not saying, the company needs to lower their bar. It's help me deliver more. And so even the comparison to this conversation is similar to what we were talking about with mental health 10 plus years ago. That to me switches the perception of this conversation, and it makes me realize that we've seen flavors of it and we've addressed flavors of it, so we can address this as well from a leadership and an organization perspective.
Nice.
That's awesome. I think for me, as I've been reflecting on our conversation here, 1, I love the fact that we're actually having those conversations and we're destigmatizing what are natural parts of being a woman and having to come into the workplace. So I think that is one powerful thing. The second thing is, I'm in perimenopause, and you've highlighted a lot of things that I don't bring up, but I recognize I'm not as sharp as I used to be. That's okay. That's okay. That's all right. I work through it.
But there is, Daniela, this is important what you're saying, because you're sharper in different ways now.
Thank you.
And no, but it's true. And I think this is also something, it's like, there's such an association with the decline, but it is actually a transition. And there are new,
beautiful,
exciting, amazing things that will come out of it. Obviously, like, it's not going to be all flowers and roses and whatever.
There's a couple of thorns.
Yes. But this is it. Like, you do not have to suffer. There are solutions out there. 1 and 2, remember, like, you're sharper in different ways.
Yes.
So I hope you lead into that.
Oh, absolutely. I love the fact that you raised that. So thank you for that. That's all I can add at this point.
Nice. Thank you, Laure, for all that as well, too. Because, Danielle, I'm with you because, oh my God, what the heck's happening here? But I would think maybe the 2 takeaways I really have from this is that, 1, again, I've been working way too long, and I have seen progression, right? Like when I first started working, mat leave was only 3 months. And then it jumped to 6 months, which everyone thought, wow, 6 months of maternity leave. And now it's up to a year and maybe even up to 18 months. I'm kind of lost track as to where that is. At least things are being recognized that, women's health doesn't need to be recognized. And 2 is kind of what you touched on a little bit too, Daniela, is be kind and courageous. If you see things are changing, start to recognize things, track, why am I impatient? The symptoms of impatience, or why am I sweating? Or why am I having these cramps? Where does my arm hurt? Really kind of keep an eye and take inventory as to how you're feeling, because it could be more than you realize. And you could be entering different stages of your life and not even realizing it. I don't want to scare anybody, but perimenopause takes about 10 years to get through. And it's not nice. It's not nice. But you know what? We all do it and we all get through it. And like I said, be kind to yourself and recognize it. Laure, the last word from you, please.
I want to emphasize the fact that we, as women, we do not need, nor should we wallow in this women's health gap. There are many things that we can do, and obviously we should get men involved in this. Double click on education, on investments we can make, on involvements we can have through foundations, through hospitals, through universities, more conversations that we can have about this topic and how it intersects with our career trajectory. Tactically, I know I am fully biased here, but I know you agree with me on this. If you work with a coach, you can probably get a little bit unstuck when it comes to navigating whatever is going on with your body and meeting yourself and your employer in a spot where you can fully live your ambition. You can do that. So look into all those things.
Fantastic. Thanks so much,
Beautiful.
Laure.
Thank you so much, Laure.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Laure.
Thanks for having me. This was great.
Thanks for listening to The Coaching Divas. If you've enjoyed this episode, leave us a review and follow us on Instagram at The Coaching Divas.
Your ratings and reviews help more people like you find our podcast.
Don't forget to subscribe and share this episode with someone you think would love it.
Until next time, we are
Claudia Jones.
Daniela Velkovic.
and Misha Jethba, The Coaching Divas.
If you're going to coach, might as well coach like a diva.